Chapter 1. Researching the Properties. Whether you are an avid flipper or you flip on the side, you should conduct in-depth research for potentially profitable flips in your area. In my past 3 flips, I have used a realtor in some capacity. As the buyer of the property, you do not have to pay for the realty costs. It is always defaulted to the seller to pay for the realty fees. This may sound like a great idea, but I recommend a couple of things when researching for a flip property. Sign with a realtor, but make sure it is somebody you trust. An unknown realtor might show you or persuade you to buy a property that is listed with him or her, so he or she will take all of the commission. It's good to have a second pair of eyes looking for you. Either way, you should still be searching for properties every day. For 2 of my flips, I found them on my own. For my very first flip, I was searching Craigslist and spotted it as a for sale by owner. The owners were willing to work with me while I acquired my loan. Your realtor will have access to comparables in that neighborhood or subdivision as well as foreclosures that come through their realty company. Remember, most banks own the foreclosures, and the banks require you to pay cash for the foreclosures. Realtors will also ask other realtors if they know of any fixer-upper houses that they have listed. No matter what, you should continue to look on your own. Most flippers focus on flipping a house because you can usually make the most profit. Condos, on the other hand, are not as profitable due to the limited space and price. Condos are usually built a certain way and provide very little opportunities for changes to be made. Most are built and priced alike, so you have very little room to make a profit. Although sometimes condos that are in the foreclosure process could be a possibility, but only if the price is low enough. Remember, in most cases, condos require a monthly homeowners association due, so make sure you factor that in when considering a condo as a flip. You will continue to pay that HOA due as long as you still own the house. Also, the HOA will most likely have tight restrictions as to the improvements you make on the outside and sometimes on the inside of the condo. If you are considering flipping a condo, speak with the HOA president or property manager to make sure you are allowed to make those improvements you have in mind. Especially if you are a first-time flipper, I recommend flipping a freestanding house. You will have much more freedom to change the house. You can paint the outside of the house without having to get prior approval. Also, walls can be taken down. Therefore, since there are more opportunities in a house, there are more opportunities to make a profit. Other residential structures can be flipped, like a duplex, an apartment, and a mobile home. These all can be flipped for a profit. However, the duplex and apartment may be difficult to resell. Those types of houses are usually rented out. The mobile home is flippable, but they may not produce as much of a profit as a freestanding house. Unless you get a great deal on the other types of houses, I strongly recommend a freestanding house to flip. Nowadays, there are so many places to look for houses on the market. Obviously, you want to consider price. Even though I bought my first flip at a higher price than what I had budgeted, I do not recommend that. Decide on a price range first, making sure you consider a reasonable budget to fix up a house. For example, if you set your repairing budget at $30,000, that money will go fast, and it will go even faster if the house you select is large. I would suggest selecting a small house if possible. However, I know that you are at the mercy of the market. Whatever is out there is what you can select from. Spend at least a few months looking over the houses that are on the market. You do not want to necessarily purchase the very first house you see. That house may be profitable, but there may be another house that comes on the market a few weeks later that will make an even bigger profit. So be patient and establish your budget for both the house and repair budget. Some of the major sites like Craigslist, For Sale by Owner, MLS, Zillow, and Realtor.com are always good sites to start to find a house to flip. After you find some potential flips, drive by those properties to see if they are in good locations, a good subdivision, do not have any major problems from the outside, and are not close to their neighbors. You would be surprised how the photographs look so much different than the actual house. I drove by one prospect where the photos of the house made the front look like a level flat front yard. However, the driveway shot straight down to the house. I looked back at the site on my phone to make sure I was at the right house. It was right. To this day, I still do not know how the photographer made that front yard look straight. So, sometimes you may have to wait for the right house to come along, but sometimes a house just falls into your lap. After I sold my first flip, a realtor friend of mine called me and discussed a property that I might be interested in. This property ended up being my second flip. Someone from her church knew she was a realtor and told her they had a house that they might want to sell. In their words, it needs work from top to bottom. And it sure did. After my initial tour of the property, a price was negotiated for a very cheap price. However, I had to pay cash for the property. Needless to say, I used every penny from my first flip, and then I made a quick phone call to Dad. With a small loan and emptying my bank account, I paid for the house. It turned out to be my most profitable flip. So consult realtor friends that you may have in your life. They may have some ideas of houses that are relatively cheap, but are not out of control. Local house auctions are another good way to find relatively cheap flips to buy. In some cases, the houses are fixed up, but most are in need of updating. I noticed that most auctions that I could attend were held on Saturdays, which was ideal for me in one regard, since I was not working on Saturdays. But it seemed that it was the most convenient day for others as well. There was much more competition to bid on this house because a lot of people were able to make this auction. The house at the auctions on Saturday sold for much higher of a price than I could make a profit. Prior to the auction, I would look on websites like Zillow or my local courthouse documents for the prices of the houses in that subdivision, so I had my price ready. However, due to the large crowd of potential buyers, my price was way too low. The weather played a factor too. The worse the weather is, the fewer the people were at the auction. Most auction companies require the buyer to pay a 10% premium on the day of the auction. This means that you actually pay 10% more for the house. So if your last bid was $100,000, then the house will actually cost $110,000. The 10% premium would be paid before you leave the auction. The remainder of the cost of the house is usually required to be paid within the next 30 days by cash or loan. Sometimes you can make an offer on a house that is up for auction prior to the auction. Either contact the auction company to see if they will accept an offer before the auction. If the owners are still living in the house, you may be able to purchase the house before the auction by approaching them to pay off their mortgage. However, this is very dangerous and risky. I do not recommend this for a first-time flipper. The more experience you have with flipping will enable you to take this route in purchasing a flip so that you have the right paperwork to sign over the house. Simply driving around great subdivisions, neighborhoods, and areas of town helped me find some potential flipping properties. My third flip happened to be in the same subdivision where I used to live and still own a rental property there. Who knew that my next flipping property would be so close?